According to estimates by the sociology professor at the University of New Mexico, Kasia Wosik, the gigantic pornography industry today has a value of almost $100 billion, something like 20 Bolsa Familia programs, which serve around 14 million homes. Its production exceeds Hollywood's in numbers, as do its profits, estimated at around 15 billion United States dollars annually. Just one pornographic material sharing website receives more than 30 billion annual visits. The influence and economic power of the porn industry today surpasses giants Netflix, NBA, or NFL. Check out the graph below. Well, as is common, money-making machines also become propaganda machines for years. Therefore, this gigantic industry has tried to defend that the use of pornography is harmless or even beneficial. However, data that has been collected by researchers from the most prestigious institutions shows a very different reality. In 2014, a study carried out by the University of Cambridge monitored the brains of 19 men while they watched pornography. The data shows that it activates the same reward centers that are activated in the brains of drug addicts. For example, when they come into contact with the substance, the conclusion is that pornography triggers compulsive behavior mechanisms. In fact, 2 of the research participants had lost their jobs due to accessing pornographic content in the workplace, and others said they had obsessive thoughts about sex. Furthermore, the same study says that the younger the person, the greater and more powerful the brain responds to this type of stimulus. This fact reveals the risks of pornography culture in times of internet, where such content is within the reach of increasingly younger users. In this sense, Specialist Paula Hall, president of the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Addiction and Compulsivity, told the British BBC News that the internet now offers non-stop sexual novelty. And further, what I'm seeing is a growing number of young men who can't maintain an erection because they've destroyed their sexual appetite with pornography. Their arousal threshold has been raised by pornographic stimulation to a point that real people are incapable of reaching. She also states that the damage to a couple's relationship can be enormous. The lies and deceit, not having sex with their partner, as they seem to have a low sexual desire, given that they are on the internet all the time. Professional Angela Gregory, who works in the English National Health System, stated in an interview with the same broadcaster that she has come across a growing number of young people with erectile dysfunction problems, which she attributes to the increase in the consumption of pornography on the internet. In fact, the popularity of platforms that aim to help people abstain from consuming pornography or compulsive sexual behavior has grown. An article from the British newspaper The Telegraph indicates several studies that point to the relationship between pornography and infidelity, reckless sexual behavior, devaluation of women, and even aggressive behavior, specifically regarding the impact of pornography on women. The researcher and specialist in assisting people or couples with problems due to pornography consumption, Dr. Jill Manning, wrote the important paper, The Impact of Pornography on Women, Social Science Findings and Clinical Observations. In short, we can conclude that research points to the fact that pornography has significant impacts on the brain and emotions and, consequently, on the formation of personality. In fact, a recent documentary Brain, Heart, World was released by the entity specializing in the debate on pornography, Fight the New Drug, which interviews numerous experts and researchers, explaining in an extremely didactic and interesting way the effects of pornography on the brain, enriching the debate. The book, The Social Costs of Pornography, addresses new discoveries. For the first time in history, pornography is made available and consumed on a large scale, mainly because of the internet. No one stops being affected by it. There is abundant empirical evidence that today's pornography is qualitatively different from previous ones in several respects. Ubiquity, use of increasingly realistic images in broadcasts, and the increasingly hardcore nature of what is consumed. The current consumption of pornography on the internet can be especially harmful to women. The current consumption of pornography on the internet can be especially harmful to children. The current consumption of pornography on the internet can be harmful to people who are not directly linked to pornography consumers, such as victims of sexual exploitation, teenage girls, people affected by family separations, etc. The consumption of pornography on the internet can be harmful to its consumers, hindering serious and lasting relationships, deteriorating sexual performance with real partners, compulsive consumption, and loss of self-control, etc. Pornography consumption is problematic for moral and philosophical reasons. Just because not everyone is harmed by pornography does not mean it should not be regulated. It is not like other drugs. The user does not need to leave home or open a wallet to purchase it. Just one click on the screen, and there it is, ready to use. Although it is not a narcotic substance, studies show that pornography has similar effects on the human brain and has the same potential to cause addiction. Still, society seems to ignore that it is a public health problem and treat its consumption as a tolerable and harmless behavior. Carrying on the memory of a few years ago, everything related to sexual debauchery, which is the primary concept of pornography, was presented in reserved images, videos, and films which were difficult to access today. This type of content is explicit in songs, clips, commercials, and films considered suitable even for children. What is not surprising is that the porn industry is one of the most profitable, moving billions of dollars a year and surpassing large entertainment empires in the world, as data from the Yahoo Finance website shows. As for the audience, its increase follows phenomena such as the growing accessibility to technology and the internet, and even the pandemic. A survey released by the American security company Netscope reveals that the consumption of pornographic content grew 600% in the first half of 2020 compared to the same period of the previous year. This is a reflection of the mass migration of workers and students to the home office system in the pandemic scenario. And among this audience are, yes, children. Regular studies confirm that they are exposed to pornography at an increasingly earlier age today. The average age at which people first come into contact with pornographic content is 9 years old. This is also the approximate age at which children usually receive their first cell phone as a gift. This is not a coincidence. According to educational psychologist Klausha Korkishko, director of the Ministry of Children and Adolescents of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in South America, this early contact results from the lack of monitoring on the part of parents and the lack of instructive conversations on the topic. Whether in the family, at school, or at church, children like to play and have attention. If they have good activities and good conversation, there is no interest in perversions in the sexual field. On the other hand, the damage of this type of content on children's minds is immense. The biggest one is exclusion from reality. Exposure to pornography promotes eroticization, not education, and encourages abusive performances, warns Glosia. For the psychopedagogue, sexual education is a very broad topic which involves the child's entire identity, and not just a part of it, such as the sexual organs. This instruction should talk more about who the child is, how God formed him, and how he can protect himself than about sex. Quality sexual education between parents and children, teachers and students, leaves an open path for dialogue and forms integrity and successful adults. And regarding age groups, there is, yes, regulation on what is appropriate or not to talk about at each age, but the basic rule is to respond to the curiosities of the phase, not delving into topics that a child does not yet have need to know. And to be assertive, one must also evaluate the context in which the child is inserted. He points out the illusion of pornography in his article on the topic, published in the 2015 edition of Quebrando Silencio magazine. Journalist Michelson Borges draws attention to another aspect of this subject: the physical and psychological consequences suffered by those who work in the pornographic industry. He cites testimonies from former porn actresses about the abuse, humiliation, and violence they suffered during recordings, the sexually transmitted diseases that affect them, in addition to the lies they are forced to tell in their performance. Many of them end up resorting to the use of drugs and alcohol to be able to film, which leads them to addiction and all its consequences. Free from this reality, today some of these actresses are fighting against the pornographic industry, exposing its ills and appealing to the population not to support this market with their audience. According to theologian Raphael Rossi, for Christians, the standard of sexual conduct is established in the Bible and can be summarized as purity of life. 1 Thessalonians 4:3, 1 Corinthians 6:13. Sex is a gift of God for human beings, therefore it must be understood as something special and that exalts human dignity. On the other hand, pornography trivializes and vulgarizes sex, in addition to creating an illusion that destroys moral and spiritual foundations. Those who consume pornography enter a prison thinking they are free. The Seventh-day Adventist Church essentially takes a stand against any form of abuse, violence, or behavior that causes physical, psychological, or spiritual harm. It is in this sense that the Breaking the Silence campaign operates, which each year brings to light a different theme, alerting and educating society about these problems and contributing with solutions. The 2015 edition addressed, above all, the topic of pornography. The materials can be found on the campaign's official website. Is it possible to get rid of pornography addiction? Yes, like any other addiction, detox is a slow and difficult process, but entirely possible. What are the steps to follow to stop this addiction? Recognizing it is the first step. And above, I already listed the symptoms of addiction. We can only transform something within ourselves when we recognize the need for change. Another step is knowing how to identify the mental triggers that lead to pornography consumption. It could be frustration, stress, anger, rejection, situations that the person doesn't know how to deal with. So they go in search of something that replaces this bad feeling with pleasure. So you need to map these triggers. She must also replace the habit with other pleasurable activities, such as physical activity, reading a book. The person may think, "What did I like to do that I ended up replacing with pornography?" and take it back. Another step, share the situation with someone you trust. When another person knows about the weakness, they can be a support in the healing process together. They can develop strategies to avoid triggers and situations conducive to the practice. It is important to remember that this person will only be a support and will never be responsible for freeing you from the addiction. A very important point is that you should not try to wean yourself from pornography. For example, if a person spends 10 hours a day consuming pornography, now they will spend 8, then 6. An abrupt break is necessary. The secret folders where she keeps her content, the websites she accesses, the groups in which she receives and shares this type of content. All of this must be definitively banned. God designed sex for reproduction, but also for pleasure, but not a solitary pleasure, or one that hurts, or that harms one's perception of the other. God thought of sex as a couple with mutual pleasure, respect, complicity, union, and emotional intimacy. In pornography, we see the opposite of this. Perceived selfishness, isolation, addiction, strictly physical pleasure, humiliation, infidelity, guilt, objectification of others, and the idea of easy pleasure, including bizarre things that can harm the body and health. So pornography is a total distortion of the divine ideal. And that's what Satan always does. He misrepresents something that was God's gift to us. And if you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video. God bless.